With that abstraction real quick, how are you guys like tangibly capturing the value, right? You've spread yourselves out to properly capture all of the mind share and to say, hey, use all of our stuff. But I'm just thinking about the fact that like almost no layer ones are actually profitable. Like almost across the board, they're all losing money with the hope that like we're positioning ourselves to succeed in the future. As you guys are pivoting from just layer one to becoming the multiverse of blockchain, how do you actually not just capture mind share, but capture value that goes back to Near as a protocol, or goes back to your tokenomics, or goes back to the foundation? Like practically, legitimately, how do you capture that value? This is the 100X podcast. We've got the legendary Jesse Eckel, the friendly Cesar Martinez, and Altan from Near. Really excited to pick your brain today, Altan. For some context, if you're listening, we interviewed maybe a month or two ago, one of my favorite episodes we've ever done was with Sweat Economy. And after that episode, Oleg sang the praises of Near and said that these guys are awesome, that he really admires what they're building. And if we could get someone on the podcast to talk to, it should be Near. So we are excited to pick your brains. Just to introduce Near, Altan, I would love to know essentially where Near fits into the 2024 puzzle. I think it's the middle of December. We're about to kick off. Everyone is feeling antsy about what's happening in crypto. And I want to know where Near fits in, what you guys are doing, what you guys are solving, why people should be paying attention to you going into this next cycle. Before we dig into everything this episode has to offer, we want to highlight the awesome partners who sponsor this podcast and make it possible for us to work full-time on 100X. They're legends, and we appreciate them for supporting us. In 2038, an asteroid collided with the moon. Now, years later, meteorites rain down upon the Earth like manna from heaven. You are an MEF operator with one goal in mind: collect the mysterious substance, compound Sigma, in the best gear you can find. Eliminate everyone in your path. It's the ultimate high-stakes treasure hunt, if you can extract alive. Built by leadership behind COD, Halo, BioShock, Ghost of Tsushima, and more, Shrapnel is the first moddable extraction shooter on the blockchain. Save Shrapnel on your epic wish list, get an extraction pack, or sign up now as early access is right around the corner. Find all the links in the description. Astrobit makes automated trading easier than ever. Connect to one of the integrated DEXs or centralized exchanges and start trading in minutes. Bring your own strategy in any language from anywhere. We also have you covered if you don't have a strategy. Browse our exclusive marketplace and find a strategy that fits your needs. Looking for a Bitcoin scalper, an ETH swing trader? Want to trade Doge automatically? Select one of the strategies built by experts and get started today. Life is hard. Crypto doesn't have to be. Set it, forget it, Astrobit. Use code 100X for 20% off your first month. Picture an app that bridges real-world experiences with Web3. MyGeoTokens has patent-pending tech that turns any location into a world of digital collectibles where you connect with big-name brands, loyalty programs, exclusive content, and more. Launch NFTs anywhere with the MyGeoTokens app. Fence, drop, and snag. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. If you want to join the adventure, listen to their episode with us or go to mygeotokens.com right now.
That's a very good question. Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's great to be in the podcast. So let's roll back, I guess. Like, what is Near, right? So Near is a scalable L1. We were actually, our founders, Ilya and Alex. They proposed sort of Ethereum 2.0 that everybody was talking about in 2018, 2019. So they came into space just thinking about like Ethereum scalability sucks. How do we build a better L1? So that's how we started our journey. And then suddenly came into our mainnet in 2020. And the promise of being Ethereum, like implementing Ethereum sharding. So building that scalable L1 with low fees, right? So a lot of users in Ethereum faced that issue, and that's why we sort of like moved Sweatcoin to Near. Just that they need to do a lot of transactions, and they've been used by millions of people in the Web2 space. So how do we move them to Web3? So that's how we came into existence, really, like as an alt L1. And then started to kind of realize, sort of going into this year, as we built something super robust that we can scale it, right? So sweat economy was our first sort of case study. Then we started working with another company in Southeast Asia that actually has access to Oppo phones, like the lock screen of the Oppo phones. And they built something quite interesting. It's called Cosmos. That it is kind of like Brave browser. So you just pop up and then you just interact with that. Like basically, they show you an ad, you interact, and you gain those tokens, and then you can actually spend those tokens in like coffee shops in Singapore and things like that. And that actually has like 2 million users, right? Just like everyday swiping and doing things, just like what you would do in TikTok, but they just do this on an Oppo phone. So that brings us to like this consumer, right? It's a very heavy consumer friendly, easy to use, and that was the kind of the vision of Near, is to build that blockchain of open web, like bring that blockchain to the user. So I think we succeeded in that, in terms of like being the number sort of 3 most used blockchain on Artemis Labs and any sort of other analytics you want to check. And then what we're going into 2024 is like, how do we take our L1 and then open it up to other ecosystems? So the 3 sort of interesting announcements we did over in NearCon, which is our sort of flagship conference that takes place in Lisbon, which Oleg loves, by the way, from Sweat. So he enjoys, he's there, obviously. So he enjoys being around the Near people and having to party a little bit as well. So what we did there is that we announced 3 different products. So Near data availability layer, which I guess Celestia is known in the market for now, to scale Ethereum rollups. And then number 2 is we're building a new settlement layer for Ethereum rollups to settle, that makes rollups faster to use for the user. And then the third one is we're building something with Polygon in their sort of ZK EVM, but more of like ZK WASM, which is a different sort of, let's say, abstraction for builders to come in and build rollups. So our roadmap is going towards kind of how do we support Ethereum builders? And yeah, that gives you an idea.
I have a question about the settlement layer. So how does that work? So if you're building another, because like layer 2 settle down to ETH. So what would be like how would it be a layer 2 and have a different settlement layer?
So the way it would work is, it's a very good question, by the way. The settlement layer, as you know, like you just basically, the way you break it down, let's just break it down, right? So there's data availability, which all the data lives, like it's not complicated. Then you have execution layer, which basically when you sign your MetaMask, you send a transaction, and the only thing that you need to know is take that transaction and implement that to the blockchain. And then you have consensus, where all the nodes that running the blockchain kind of admit that the things that are correct. So like all 4 of us sit and say, hey, this is the right sort of way to do this. And then I guess the settlement layer, where we just say, hey, all of us agreed that this is the case. Now this is where we will like send that, right? So fast settlement layer would be something like you would settle on that layer before you settle onto Ethereum. So the problem with Ethereum is that it takes a long time to kind of settle. So it takes like 12 minutes. With this, we can settle with eigenlayer security, which is taking Ethereum security, and settle in only like 2-3 minutes, and onto Near, and then settle onto Ethereum later. So you still get Ethereum settlement, but if you want to do something really fast on the rollups, you can actually rely on the Near security plus eigenlayer security.
So it's almost like a pre-settlement to allow for like faster use cases. What would happen though if like, say, there was, in theory, right, like a malicious transaction of some sort, right? Like, so it settles, it pre-settles on whatever, Near settlement layer. And then when it goes down to ETH, it gets rejected for whatever reason. What would happen in a circumstance like that?
Good
I know
question.
that's a really weird, obscure thing, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, so the way it would work is eigenlayer validators would actually get slashed in that case.
Okay.
So yeah, so like they're not incentivized to do that because they will get slashed into Ethereum. So it's
what
almost
would happen
like
to the transaction that went through? Like, would it get undone, or what would?
So in the transaction side, I guess, so on the Near side, well, you colluded on Near. I think it's a rollback, but I need to check again the docs.
Okay. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
that. Okay, so that's really interesting. I can see how that would be useful, especially if it was secure, because you're still getting, I guess, some fundamental security from Ethereum. But I think probably a lot of the people from the Ethereum Foundation would argue that like that's not a true. I mean, they argue that if you're using a data availability layer like Celestia or Near, that it's not even a true L2. So it's you guys are essentially leaning in pretty heavily into like this modular thesis for blockchains where you're like, hey, we want to build we have a layer one blockchain, which is Near. But then
Hmm.
like as a second function, we have this entire marketplace of modular pieces to build out
Yeah.
a modular blockchain that we want to provide. Was that a
Yeah.
good way to explain it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's more like cloud in some way. So, like, we were having this conversation. I was talking to somebody before this call from Cosmos ecosystem. And it's more like it's just plug and play. Like, that's what the blockchain space is kind of going towards.
Yeah.
More like, hey, I built. I mean, you can even like build a roll up and then move that from like an OP stack and then move that to Polygon if you really want to, right? So these things are kind of like in cloud. You can build on Google and then you take it to Amazon if they really want to. And if you don't like, if Amazon gives you a better deal, you can just like move, which is kind of happens all the time in cloud. So I think we're going towards that space in some of the modularity like play.
Do you see that being like fundamentally so maybe not like insanely less secure, right? Like, so if you're looking at it, it's like it's still insanely secure. But would you see that as fundamentally less secure? So, like, if you have this modular build out where you have
Mm-hmm.
maybe multiple different trust assumptions you have to make with like the data availability, you have the near settlement, versus just settling down to say like the near L1. Like, which one would be fundamentally more secure in your mind?
I mean, if you think about, I mean, Ethereum is the most secure layer in crypto. I mean, that's just like, let's just not argue. Like it is established fact just because it's, I mean, the number of validators, the Ethereum stake is kind of crazy, right? So like, if you think about that, all of us see Ethereum as the ultimate settlement layer. But then I love to think about modularity as more of a spectrum, right? So there's going to be rollups that want to have cheaper data availability that do not want to pay Ethereum that much money, which the rollup operators, which is sequences, we can get deeper into that too, but you can actually make money by just like having a cheaper rollup running, or you're just like, I don't know, like Matthew wants to launch a chain, but Matthew wants to launch a chain for his friends, but like he doesn't want to pay Ethereum a lot of money, so he can just like use Near DA or Celestia or EigenDA to kind of like spin up a cheaper chain, right? So like that's kind of the space here is just that like the idea is that not only Optimism can run rollups, but everyone can run rollups, right?
It's almost like Ethereum's like maybe the Fed or the bank layer, right? And then like on top of it, you have all these other layer twos that are more like the Visa. They're like the payment layer. So when you're doing fast payments, lots of small transactions, you want really cheap data availability. You want maybe that quicker settlement through Near. But then like when it comes to moving like $1 trillion, maybe you're willing to pay like a $500 fee on ETH to make sure that's got the full security guarantees. Is that a good way to lay it out?
Yeah, yeah, and also like that's perfect way to think about it. Or like even thinking about like I guess I'll abstract that and maybe take it to some like servers. So like I've been programming since I was like probably 12. So like before AWS, like it was really hard to kind of build your own server, deploy your server, do that stuff. Like that was like for small fish, it was really hard. Like it's really hard to do that. Then I guess with AWS coming in and then Google Cloud following in, it was more like, hey, there's this place that you can go and just spin up your server and then deploy that there, and then that's super cheap because you secure like AWS's security or AWS's guarantees to kind of get that, right? So I'm thinking about more like the cloud, but I guess like makes sense on a nation state or like payment provider perspective as well.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it, and that makes sense to me. I'll pass it off to Matt or Caesar. Sorry, didn't mean that.
Yeah, to zoom back a second there, as we're talking about like what you guys have become, I'm curious on 2 points, right? The first intro to Near that you essentially gave is, hey, in the early days, we saw where Ethereum was failing, and we came in and solved that, and we proved that use case with examples like Sweat Economy. So the faster, the cheaper, the more scalable, right? You were able to do that.
Yeah.
And now you've pivoted as the entire market has pivoted to becoming more connected. It's all about interoperability right now. And so you guys are solving that. Did you see yourselves as a competitor to Ethereum early on? Do you see yourselves as a competitor to Ethereum now? Like, how do you fit in as far as like your guys' perspective behind the scenes when it comes to L1, but also Ethereum aligned?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I guess the way we started, I mean, I was also not with the foundation at the time, but been following Near closely. So the way we started is like, okay, let's build sharding, right? Literally, our founders had a proposal with sharding, but I mean, blockchains are also very political in some sense. So like you see
sure.
some of these collisions, right? Like I guess there was no alignment to build sharding for Ethereum. I don't know the details of why it didn't happen at the time. So then our founders were like, hey, let's just build our own layer one and build this thing that we've been thinking about for a while. So we raised on that promise of like, hey, let's build sort of sharded blockchain. But like as years passed by, I guess like we started to sort of like it became clear to us that like market wanted Ethereum as security layer, right? It's like this the where you want to kind of settle your stuff and move your, I don't know, $1 trillion over because it's just more secure. And then the question becomes as market moves is like, how do you, I mean, this is also what a lot of big companies do is like, how do we become and stay relevant in the market that's moving? And this was kind of the easy, like the kind of the best way to present ourselves relevant, right? And this is also like one of the things you working as a layer one or layer two, whatever, like a hard part about working in crypto is like this to keep that context and read and write and then also like just keep that and implement to your work, which is one of the like crazies I've seen in my life. That's kind of gives you a bit of a understanding how we started and where we are.
And so now with where you're at now, do you think like the push for Near is, hey, come build on Near, or is it come use the tools that we've built, like the finality layer with EigenLayer? Like, where are you incentivizing people to participate with Near? Is it on the layer one, or is it with the tools you've built for the ETH ecosystem?
Yeah, so very good question. So if a game comes in tomorrow and says, I will do a lot of transactions, I would push them to Near L1 just because it is a better solution. So I'm trying to think about it again, going back to the cloud analogy, right? So in cloud, and Shiram from EigenLayer uses this a lot of notion is like, you have different like solutions, right? So Near builds a lot of solutions. L1 is part of that solution, and then you can break that L1 into different pieces like the DA. And if a game comes in and says, I'm going to do a lot of transactions, that's Near L1. But if somebody comes in and says, well, I want to do an Ethereum aligned, roll up, that's like, hey, just use Near DA. Or let's say I'm totally throwing something else, but let's say Uniswap comes in and says, I want a sort of very fast swap from Arbitrum to Optimism, right? That's like EigenLayer fast finality layer. So like it is these tools that if you're working in business development like myself, like, and then those tools kind of be like, hey, where does this fit in, right? So like all these solutions and how do we fit that really?
You've got an entire like suite, the toolbox that you can just give to people based on what they need at this point.
Exactly. We even have decentralized front ends, right? Like you can build front ends on Near. Like you can run this sort of Riverslide or any like YouTube, whatever, technically on Near, right? So that's kind of the idea. Like we have everything, like a full stack blockchain kind of thing.
Is I've never used Near. Is Near like an EVM chain? Is it like work with MetaMask or no? You gotta use your own special wallet.
Yeah, so we have a lot of wallets, but it has its own like My Near wallet, like Here wallet, or like there's a lot of wallets in the ecosystem. It is WASM based, so like Cosmos.
Got it.
But we have an EVM layer. So if you want to build
an EVM layer,
MetaMask,
so similar like Avalanche, where they have like their C chain plus their like native Avalanche.
Sort of, but it is different. It's not a chain itself. It is a smart contract.
If you're sort of Cosmos, are you IBC enabled? Is it like that depth of Cosmos? Yeah.
Yeah, we are connected to IBC, so we have that. But like if you want to just transfer from Cosmos to kind of Near, that's possible. Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, you guys are building all these like modular tools. Is there like a version of Near in the future where you have like, your EVM layer that's like is kind of a layer two, but it's using a bunch of modular, like it's using your own settlement, it's using your DA. Is that something you're building towards?
No, that's a very good question. So there's another company called Aurora in the ecosystem, was built by one of the engineers in like working for Near Data Inc. at the time, so the builders of like Near Protocol. So they actually built their own company, raised their own thing, which is called Aurora Labs, which is we have a bridge called Rainbow Bridge from Ethereum to Near. So they built that. While they were building that, they also realized that they can actually do like an EVM layer. So you can like even deploy everything there. So like 1inch is there. There's a lot of like cool EVM stuff there. So it's like it looks like its own blockchain, but it is actually a smart contract on Near. So there's like games there. You can check it out. It's
So the
Aurora.
liquidity
So
isn't like fractured out. Like do you have to bridge between Near and this like EVM layer of Near, or?
it is very easy. So that's very easy to do. So you can even do things like an EVM contract talking to a Near contract natively. So it's called cross contract calls, right? So yeah, so like there's like liquidity of Near. Like, it's very similar actually because EVM it's easier to pull the liquidity into an EVM. Like it's quite funny that it's like almost have the same liquidity on Aurora versus Near. But that's because it's just so much easier for people to deploy on EVM
Yeah.
because they build contracts.
For some reason, there's almost like a little network effect there. Like
Yeah.
you saw Blastel too. They didn't have anything built, and they like surpassed like so many different chains, and it was just absolute garbage. And yet there's just so much money within the Ethereum ecosystem, and for some reason, people are like unwilling to explore outside of that. That's interesting. So Near has its own EVM sort of layer. It's also Cosmos. It's IBC enabled, and it's also building all these like layer 2 modular tools. So you guys are really kind of like sort of hard to pin down as like this one thing. You're more like you said, you're almost like Amazon. Like you have AWS, you have the store, you have all these different things you do. You're not just like a one-stop shop.
Yeah, you're not exaggerating when Near says that you guys are like trying to conquer everything all at once.
And I had a question with that, right? Because I mean, in the last 19 minutes that we've been recording, I feel like we've heard a lot of what you guys are building, and you guys have your hand in a lot of different pots. So, like Matthew and Jesse just said, it's very hard to pinpoint what you guys like. If people were to say what is Near, it's very hard to say what is Near because Near is a lot of things. And I think before this conversation, before I really started deep diving into Near, after Sweat Economy, I started using the Sweat wallet. So I was really deep diving. I got my wife into Sweat, so it's very easy to use, and I understand how easy it really is to use. But if you were to ask me what is Near, I would have just said, oh, it's another L1 that is competing with E, that's competing with Sol. I think that's completely wrong. And maybe there's a lot of people who believe that and who see Near as that still. How has that sort of communication, or are you guys trying to change that narrative to say, hey, we're not just an L1 competing with ETH anymore. We're not just an L1 solving the trilemma. We really are trying to branch out. How has that shift in narrative been like for you guys? Has it been a struggle to get people to realize that you guys are much more than just an L1? How has that been like, and what sort of strides are you guys taking to go ahead and show people, hey, we're a lot more, and we really are trying to be the OS for an open web, that's the tagline on your website.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, I mean, this really depends. It takes a lot of time to change a narrative, right? I mean, like you probably have seen it as a kind of a creator as well. Like if you build some content around something and then you want to build another content, it takes time to kind of change your narrative and change your like style and everything, right? So we've been trying to do that over the last year. I think at first when we released sort of operating system, like blockchain operating system, it didn't resonate with a lot of people. Like that's kind of the feedback I've heard as well. I think the more we kind of started to feel a bit more like the example that Jesse gave is like the sort of like the cloud and AWS cloud makes more sense to me just because like AWS has a lot of different products, has one flagship product, which is like, I guess, like having the ability to kind of spin up your server. For us, it's like just the L1 blockchain. But just because we built some stuff and then we start to kind of do that, right? So for us, changing the narrative really like started to, one of the things I've realized is kind of working for an L1 is that like partnerships are really important, like what other people say about what Near is. So like announcing stuff with Polygon on zk-wasm, like doing this with Eigenlayer, and then more people start to reach out, be like, oh, well, that's interesting. Like, oh, Near is just not like L1. Like, I want to also use these things, right? Like, I had a call with another sort of kind of Cosmos SDK type of like a provider, and they just like exactly said the same thing. Oh, this is super interesting. You guys have this like fast finality. Oh, we want to use that too, right? So that's kind of like the way we think about it. Versus operating system doesn't kind of like resonate with a lot of people because it's very sort of very builder heavy. But like cloud is like everybody understands cloud in some way, right? Like even my sort of dad understands what cloud is. It used to be that changing, but like now everybody has an understanding of like what cloud is.
What does that mean? The blockchain operating system, the BOS, like, is that a specific thing that Near does, or is that like to try to summarize all of the things you do?
Yeah, try to summarize everything we do, right? So like starting, I guess, from a front end. Like so front end is you can build that on Near. So the code lives on Near and then like literally gets rendered. So the page that you see actually gets rendered from Near, right? Then you actually like go down and down. So like middleware, which is like the wallets, all of that stuff. And how do you talk back to that sort of blockchain? And then finally in like a operating system, it's more like really the down layer of an operating system is like the blockchain, right? So everything you build kind of gets back to that, really.
I had another question here because now that we've started to talk about the BOS a little bit, and it seems when I was looking into the BOS and what sort of utilities and features it has, I mean, you guys have things to really help anyone building in Web 2 and Web 3, from allowing dApps to build with JavaScript to onboarding users with fast authentication to making everything in BOS open source by default. I think a lot of these things are often overlooked because most people are not developers and most people are just users and just trying to figure out where can I place my money to 100x. I mean, we're the 100x podcast. So that's really what we try to focus on. But I think when you start focusing on a lot of different things like Near is seeming to do, you guys have like all these different things that we've talked about over the last 20 minutes. How do you guys decide what things to specifically put a little bit more focus to? Because at the end of the day, when you try to spread yourself too thin and really try to because in a lot of things that you've mentioned over the last 20 minutes, there's other people are doing the same thing. There's other ZK rollups that are trying to be the fastest finality. There are other people trying to make building a Web3 the easiest possible. There are other layer ones. There are other L2s on layer ones. How do you guys decide what to put most of your focus on to make sure that, hey, we can be really competitive in these areas? Maybe if some of those other stuff gets sort of put in the back burner and then, really put some attention to that later.
Yeah. So last year we put a lot of focus into getting users. Like that was kind of the way to grow the Near ecosystem. I mean, that's why like Sweat got 1 million, like Cosmos has like 2 million on that radar. If you just start checking, it's like top 2 like apps, like I think top 2 or 3 apps. Like there's one gaming app that's like mobile and based in the UK. They're all like they're built on Near, so like top 5 out of 3. So that was our focus last year. This year coming into sort of like, I mean, started as an L1, but then kind of started to sort of think about like what to do next. And then the next year we're thinking about more like how do we play into modularity? So trying to be a competitor to kind of like in the DA space mainly to Celestia and EigenDA. So that would be the focus next year, to kind of like focus on the modularity and really bring in DeFi back, because I don't think our DeFi is very strong, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Like as we kind of mentioned about EVM, network effects. How do we do that? So that kind of gives the focus. But I guess like every year these are kind of like you look at the narrative and try to see what's really important and how do we stay relevant.
I have a question, just while that is a little bit off topic. I've just been thinking about what you guys are solving, how intriguing you're becoming to me. You're like a top, if you look at Near, right? I think you're ranked 27. You're like a top 50, top 30 token in all of crypto. Obviously, you're a part of the conversation. You mentioned real early on when it comes to like active users on Near, like you're a top 3 or a top 5. Depending on what day you look. So you've earned your space in the conversation. And now you've pivoted to the way that you're introducing yourself to new people in this market, the way that you're solving problems. Hey, we don't just want to be a layer one. We actually became a layer one because we wanted to solve problems that Ethereum was not ready to solve with the sharding. Now they're ready, so we're stepping in. Okay, so like you've painted that narrative really well, and I'm just curious, as someone who came into the space as like retail user, again, no technical background. I've learned the technical stuff from probably thousands of conversations now with people way smarter than I am, and I feel like, hey, I can play on the field now when I couldn't when I came into the space. But in the back of my mind, I'm still always thinking, as far as narratives, because you're talking a lot about. I think Caesar mentioned a question about, hey, the what did you guys say? You were talking about how some of these things get overlooked because maybe the average person is just thinking about money. And so I think obviously a lot of attention getting to Near is not going to be about what you do best. It's going to be about how people perceive you, and how they can interact with you and how they can make their money, and whether that's buying things, or that's farming things, or that's providing liquidity for things. And I'm curious, like as a retail user, how do you guys want retail users actually interacting with Near? So the people that want to make money, are they interacting on the layer one? Are they buying the token? Are they providing liquidity somewhere? How would those people fit into the ecosystem?
Yeah, so I guess like there's two things. I mean, you can also like thinking about this. So the way we thought about this always was like, crypto isn't just for speculation, right? I mean, there's a real blockchain, the technology that can change everything in the world. I mean, that's how we kind of started. Our white paper mentions about an open web, where you can build everything in an open web. The way we thought about that has always been, we need to just, will be just like using like a normal internet protocol. They should be using Near, but they shouldn't realize that they're using Near, right? So that's kind of been the Sweat, kind of been that way. Cosmos have been that way, but you're right in that a lot of people expect airdrops. A lot of people want to make money because that's like how people think about incentives. And
yeah, I mean, you mentioned like Ethereum winning that, right? That Ethereum won that mind share, and I wonder how many of the people that have like hailed Ethereum as the winner actually care about it as the security layer, and instead just found it an easy place to make money. I don't know. I think that a lot of the narrative comes back to like, hey, I made money here, so it's awesome, and they don't really get it.
Yeah, that is true.
How do you bait them in so that they make money, so then that they get it? It's like that's the pathway.
That's true. I mean, I can't talk about the tokens, but like, let's leave that.
Yeah, I'm not trying to trap you. I'm just curious, how you guys see it on the back.
As in like just to think about that. I mean, that's how we see it. Mainly, like our vision has always been kind of getting Near used as a blockchain at the back that people. It's just not. It's like kind of like a database that people use, and if they really in a doomsday scenario where something happens, they can claim their assets, just like Vitalik talks about that all the time with the World of Warcraft example. Like somebody, they blocked my World of Warcraft. I got super angry. So that kind of the mindset that like Ilya has too is very, he's also like Eastern European. He grew up in a certain culture. Like he's seen these things, and he's like, up until the doomsday, like I don't want to trust Google or Amazon to do certain things for me. And in that case, so that's kind of the Near's vision, really, to be that layer.
And I would add to the narrative thing, Matt, that it's like in crypto, that is a thing. Like, in the short term, it is all narrative wars. But it's a Warren Buffett quote where he says, in the short term, the stock market's a voting machine. In the long term, it's a weighing machine. And so I think with a lot of these protocols, maybe the best builders that are, maybe not spreading the best narratives, in the short term, they don't see that huge price appreciation. But in the long term, the ones that are building the fundamentals are the ones that end up succeeding. And so I think that's where Near's position.
Well, we've seen that in the last bull market, just reminding that, right? People came to the space to make money, and a lot of people lost a lot of their savings, right? Yeah. So that's one of the things. Is like we've always wanted to be careful about that, just because it's people see this as an internet casino. I don't think one of the theses we had always been that kind of like, how do we push this a lot of people see this as like, if you talk to your mom or dad, they're like, what the hell is this? It just looks like a casino. Like, I don't understand this. So how do we push that narrative? Right? Because otherwise, like, it would be a great tool for degens, like to come in and like Solana has been seeing that, which I love Solana's technology too, by the way. It's one of the things that, like, if you like hyperscale, scalable blockchains, like Near, Solana, all these, like, people study that just because it's like, it's great technologies. But it's like, at the end of the day, like, if it's going to change people's lives, like, it is different, right? So just to kind of put that vision there from like our founder thinks that way too. So that's the how we are.
How does Near compare to Solana? Like speed, transaction costs?
Yeah, so Solana is the finality is faster. But the Solana has always been the vision of like Anatoly. But I mean, there's a very, very good, if you're very technical, obviously, go watch this. There's a debate between Anatoly, the founder of Solana, and the two founders of Near in like from 2018, 2019, because they're the same batch blockchains. Solana is just like a ton of hardware. It's more like to be operating a node on Solana, you need to have a very, very strong machine, right? So it is very far away from like Ethereum's vision of like decentralize everything. Everybody runs a node, versus Solana is like, well, I have this heavy machine and I want to run this, right? So Near sends like a bit of like Ethereum in that case. Like it's, you don't need a strong machine to participate as a validator. And we're actually planning to increase that more, like something called stateless validators, which is very technical. But the idea is that it is kind of like a light node that you can run to participate in the network. So to decentralize the network.
So Solana's faster. What's the cost of like transaction on Near?
So cost of transaction is probably something around like 1 cent, sometimes less than 1 cent. Right. So like
which that's impressive because you guys actually have a lot of users using Near, and so you're keeping around 1 cent. So you're really cheap. Is there, but like as far as like usability, like it's still pretty fast. Like maybe it's not as fast as Solana, but like from my experience, like a lot of the layer 2s, they're really fast. A lot of these alt L1s are really fast. Like compared to Ethereum, most of those things are going to be a lot faster finality just because, they're built a little different.
Yeah, and they also don't have the kind of the burden of EVM, right? Because the EVM is just a bit of a we don't like our gas fee model is different. But like if I were to send something, like this is one of the beauties of crypto is like if I'm sending you USDC from London, wherever you guys are in the US, like I can just send you, in like 2 seconds. You can just use that. Like that's the beauty of it.
So for like most use cases, something like Near and Solana are the same thing. Like I know Anatoly's vision is like high speed trading. That's why he wants everything so fast. And for 99.9% of people, that literally doesn't matter. When you're talking about like Wall Street and different things like that, that's where he's focused. And he has this really, insane vision of like just really, really fast trading, which I think most people don't understand that. It's just like even he says he's not trying to be like an ETH killer. He's trying to build an entirely different type of product where he envisions like people trading on it specifically, versus ETH is wanting to be just something very different. It's like almost like a utility for humankind in a way. And it sounds like Near's kind of like almost positioned in between. Like it's like you want to be a utility, but like you have this suite of products to like allow people to build. In a lot of ways, you're positioned to benefit from like the explosion of blockchains, because I think pretty soon here we're going to solve the interoperability problem. I think Polygon's probably in the lead, actually. I think most people are sleeping on that, but I think Polygon right now has some pretty insane solutions to solving the interop problem. And then it comes down to like, well, once blockchains can like transfer between each other like instantly with no bridging, well, then all that liquidity just kind of gets spread around. And you can have 1 million blockchains. Like you could build a blockchain for every single application and it wouldn't matter because you have instant bridging between them. Like it's as if the funds are already there. And so at that point, something like Near makes a lot of sense because you're positioned to literally be everywhere. Like everyone can build with you. And like having a alt L1 doesn't matter because you don't have these moats anymore. The moats don't exist. Everyone can move between blockchains. So you could plug into literally thousands or millions of blockchains, depending on like, if it's like websites. And you could be some part of that tech stack that helps build all those things. Is that kind of like the vision there? Like that's where you think going?
You guys are the multiverse.
Yeah, and then that's what becomes with cloud, right? I mean, cloud example makes sense there because it's like we have a cloud suite, like pseudo products that like if people want to build something. And by the way, like I mean, you capture mind share just by being there. You capture sometimes liquidity there because some stuff are moving. So like if let's say people are settling on Eigen layer, fast settlement layer, well, we kind of capture that too because it's kind of using the near validators. So like, how do we capture the most of the kind of that space as to like how do we help other people to kind of be part of that conversation is the kind of where we're trying to be, which is kind of the fascinating space. Is like everything kind of clashing together. Like when you think about internet, it's not like a couple of internet. Like it's just one internet with just people building stuff on it, right? So I think that's where the space is going mainly. Just like eventually, it's not going to matter where your blockchain you're using, and that comes with chain abstraction. Is like how do you kind of move assets between, like it's just going to be like ask your significant others whatever to use like I don't know wormhole. Like it is very hard to use, right? It's just like what is this chain? What is that? What is this? And like you can't just explain to normal people, but if you can abstract everything, just like what we did with internet, that makes sense.
So
I have a question here.
With that abstraction, real quick, how are you guys like tangibly capturing the value? Right, you've spread yourselves out to properly capture all of the mind share and to say, hey, use all of our stuff. But I'm just thinking about the fact that like almost no layer ones are actually profitable. Like almost across the board, they're all losing money with the hope that like we're positioning ourselves to succeed in the future. As you guys are pivoting from just layer one to becoming the multiverse of blockchain, how do you actually not just capture mind share, but capture value that goes back to Near as a protocol, or goes back to your tokenomics, or goes back to the foundation? Like practically, legitimately, how do you capture that value?
So I guess let me roll back. So we had like inscriptions come into Near last week. We had a huge like number and spike of like transactions. Like people were just like it was like what like
wild,
like millions of transactions in a day. And I mean that every L1 faced that too, which was kind of funny because like it started like with like Avalanche had that, and then like L2's like Polygon had that at the same time, which was hilarious. But the thing is like what I'm trying to make is we burn like how much? So it's like we burn I think like 350K Near during that event. So just because like, it becomes inflationary at a certain point when you deflationary when you hit a certain transaction number, right? So what you can do is eventually like the way you capture fees is well, first DA everybody pays to post data on Near, right? So that you pay for it. On the settlement stuff, kind of you pay Near, sort of it settles on Near, so you kind of pay transactions on Near. Everybody that uses Sweat or like consumer apps pay, even though sometimes app pay for them, right? They still they still pay transaction fees. So that's kind of the way to think about it. Like everything that touches sort of the Near protocol is actually just generating transactions.
You guys becoming deflationary. Did you like become deflationary temporarily on that day?
Yeah, so we burned Near. Yeah, so that was like
so you
that
were
was
actually
kind of
deflationary that day.
But
the idea then is,
so
put really simply, when the multiverse of crypto happens, when somebody solves interoperability, whether that's Polygon, like Jesse said, or that's someone else, or that's something you guys are involved in, when that's actually solved, and that interop problem is no longer a problem, and people are using Near's suite for literally everything, that should theoretically make you deflationary.
Yeah, if you use a lot of like tons of transactions in a year or whatever. But there's the white paper explains that. But the thing is like there needs to be a lot of transactions like the internet in some way.
But is it like, I know Solana, it's like the amount of transactions you would need on Solana in order to make it profitable is like near impossible. Like you would have like literally near impossible for them to flip profitable. So they would have to figure out like some other way to capture fees, to which they could. You know, Amazon did the same thing. It's not like a huge problem. But I'm wondering with Near, like what is that like, especially with the DA, like how many people need to be posting to DA or posting their data on Near's DA for it to be profitable, or using the settlement layer? Yeah,
it is very high. Yeah, you're right.
It's
I mean,
very high
it is kind of like Solana. It is very high, but you can see the spikes like sometimes to kind of see that deflation, but like it needs to keep that sort of activity, right? Like Ethereum has that, right? So Ethereum actually started to be deflationary. just because there's too much stuff going on in Ethereum.
Yeah.
I have a question here that I think sort of builds on top of everything that we've been talking about. Until sort of we get to that point where everything is interoperable and we have those issues fixed, where liquidity is no longer an issue and people no longer have to build on places that have a lot of transactions and a lot of activity. Now they can build on places that are easy to build on, because I think a lot of people build on ETH and build on the L2s, not because it's easy to build on, not because it's easy to use, not because it's user friendly, but it's because that's where most of the people are, where the transactions are happening, where people are buying and selling, where people are just throwing their thousands of dollars away on meme coins. That's why people build on those sort of chains. But what you guys are saying is, hey, we have the tools, we have the capabilities for you to build something super consumer friendly. My wife uses the Sweat wallet every single day. We started using it ever since that episode, and I can guarantee you she has no idea what Near is, because it's so simple and it's so in the background. And I think you guys really hitting the nail. In order for crypto to become massively adopted, people don't have to ever think about what chain they're using it on, what security, ETH and layer 2s and this and that. All that has to be in the background. All that has to be for us to know, for us to really understand, to make, educated decisions. The consumer just wants to, hey, I want to be able to click a button and send that money, and I want to make sure that money was sent properly. I think you guys have the tools to build that, and apps like Sweat really show that, hey, it works. But with apps like Sweat, and I forget the name of the other one from Southeast Asia, those apps, I think, and those applications already came with a lot of users. Like Sweat already had a lot of users from their Web2 application. So them building on Near, was obvious because they weren't having to look for the users to actually make Sweat run, and they weren't looking for the users. They already had those. And I think with the Southeast Asian app, I believe they already also had a lot of users. So for now, any application that comes from Web 2 or is building on Web 3 that already has a lot of users, I think building on Near makes complete sense. How do you entice, until we live in that world where interoperability is already solved, how do you entice people who are looking to build on ETH or an L2 on ETH or Solana, because it's all the hype right now? How do you entice them? Like, hey, we understand that maybe you're just searching for the users right now, even though it's going to be harder for you to build on Near. Is that what you guys are? Is that a focus that you guys are trying to focus on, or are you guys just saying, hey, we're going to write it out with the applications that we have, the people that approach us, and once we get to the interoperability heaven that we hope to be sooner rather than later, they will just dominate in terms of everybody building?
Interop doesn't have to be solved for them to be useful. Sorry, that I might have miscommunicated that. Technically, any blockchain building can build using the modular parts of Near, is what he's saying. So you don't have to have interoperability. What I was saying is their use would explode with interoperability because you'd have a lot more blockchains. But right now,
where you have
any blockchain launching,
you can also capture the user value too. It's not just that, right? So you have the modularity, but you still have the users coming in, and that's one of the things is like we have 5 million users, but we can also have DA, which is not going to impact the users either, right? So that's kind of the vision. That makes sense. Versus Celestia, if you think about it, the only thing that Celestia works on is just data availability. The rest is they're not a consumer blockchain, right? So if you get TIA yourself, the only utility of TIA is actually for you to kind of post data. There's no other utility of TIA, right? Versus Near is you can swap it to USD and do things, or USDC, or you can pay for, I don't know, just going back to that utility, right? You can pay for data, or you can just swap it to Sweatcoin and do other things and get discounts, or go to Kai. So there's a lot more utility going on there, right? We're just not we're all of these things. That comes almost like a utility token, right? It's you use that kind of to pay up for other things or do other things.
Yeah, it's like when I guess to really understand a modular blockchain, it's you could build a blockchain and just have it directly settle down to Ethereum, and that's what Arbitrum is, and that's what optimism is. But then you look at something like Eclipse, and Eclipse settles down to Ethereum, right? But it does its data availability, which is kind of where the majority of the gas cost comes from. It's doing that on Celestia, I think.
Celestia,
yeah. And so it's choosing to kind of split that function instead, where Arbitrum and Optimism are doing that all on Ethereum. It's saying I'm going to do part of that on Ethereum, and the other part I'm going to do on Celestia. And so it's just like building your blockchain instead of having it be built out of one piece. Now you're building it out of two. And then what Near's doing is saying, well, actually, you could build it out of three because you could have this settlement layer in the middle that makes even the finality faster. And then, and so that's kind of a modular blockchain is it's taking the pieces that were typically just one piece and splitting the functions into multiple different pieces for things like speed and costs.
Yep. It's Legos. It's saying here, you want the security of Ethereum. You can have it, but you can also have way better speed. You can also have way cheaper data. Like, let's take Ethereum security and give you the speed and the cost that Ethereum can't.
But you are making compromises. So you are like, you are getting it secure. You're getting a degraded security because you're making different trust assumptions. And so like, yeah. But for a lot of things, like if you're doing like a meme coin, it doesn't like, you know what I mean? Like we mentioned earlier, those trust assumptions would be really important if it's $100 trillion you're moving. You know, like if you think about the world's economy, something like Ethereum makes a lot of sense. But if you're thinking about like a payments rail, something like a modular blockchain setup makes a lot more sense. And so it just depends on what you're using it for.
Yeah.
So with that idea in mind of modularity, then, if I'm understanding it correctly, if me and Matthew and Jesse wanted to build the 100x application and we wanted to capture all the attention and all the traction that ETH has, and we wanted to launch it on ETH, would we right now be able to use all the tools that Near has created, the BOS and all the user friendly app tools in order to create the application and then still launch it on ETH?
The token, you mean, or the launch
the
it on
application and the token,
the DApp itself.
Well, is it? Do you guys do anything with dApps, or is it just blockchains?
No, we have. I mean, we have a DApp, like we have applications running on, like basically Sweatcoin is a DApp, right?
Yeah.
What I mean is like, do you have tools for app building, or is that?
Yeah, it's the same. Like we have you build smart contracts on Rust or JavaScript. Obviously, you can build it on Solidity on Aurora, which is still kind of that. And then the rest is just like front ends. You can even build the front end JS on Near, but like if you really care about the front end, like if you're using Tornado Cache, you don't want it to get censored, but you want to put up
decentralized front ends, like kind of like what GMX has.
Yeah, we just basically like it's decentralized. We actually work with like ZK Sync. Some of their protocols are building their front ends on Near. So like you wouldn't get censored because the validators are not just in the US, it's everywhere, right? So you can't just shut down a front end. Yeah,
that's really cool. I don't understand why every crypto site doesn't have a decentralized front end. It like doesn't make, especially the ones that block US users. I'm like, why can't you just have a decentralized front end? It's not that hard.
Yeah, so that's one of the things is like BOS is part of that. So you can write that front end code on Near. Everyone can see that code, obviously. But the thing is, you can't censor it because there's validators all around the world, right? So you have to kind of shut down validators if you really have to do that.
Couldn't technically anyone build a decentralized front end for any protocol?
No, because it would be super expensive.
What do you mean?
Or like you would need the tools to build it. So we have WASM execution environment. You can't just like put everything on EVM.
What I mean is using your tool set. If I had a site,
everyone can. You're right. Yeah, like ZK Sync has built some stuff. We've announced like partnerships. Mental Network is doing that. Like there's a lot of protocols that we've like announced that they're doing like some of their front ends on Near.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. But
Alton, go ahead, Jesse.
I was just Caesar to answer your question. The modular part for like DA and the settlement layer, that's not specifically for apps though. That's for like a blockchain. So like again, like Arbitrum, Optimism, Eclipse, Polygon, things like that. Like Polygon's new, like they're shifting their proof of stake one where they're going to be a wow, I'm blanking right now, but they're going to basically have it so that they're it settles down to ETH, but it's using its own DA. It's not going to be Celestia. It's going to be like a Polygon DA layer or something like that. And so it's just when it comes to building blockchains, not specifically apps, if that makes sense.
Will it ever get to that point, though? I guess that would be my only follow-up question. Will it ever get to the point? Because what I was imagining is, hey, if the BOS is the Wix of the blockchain. I mean, you go to Wix, you create a website up in 5 minutes, and then you can deploy that on any browser that you want and whatever, right? That's what I was envisioning. Will it ever get to that point where I can just go to Near, build up an application like a Wix.com, and then just go ahead and deploy that on any blockchain that I want?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I mean, that's the vision, right? I mean, we've been building that since 2020. It just takes a lot of time. Again, rolling back, right? Like blockchains as a concept has existed like since 1980s or 1990s, but like the real blockchain that came was Bitcoin, right? Before that, there was no like production blockchain really. I mean, there was some stuff like, but mainly really like people get to know what a blockchain is with Bitcoin. So like, if you think about it, we're literally like 15-year-old, industry, right? So like, we'll get there. I mean, internet has been around for way longer than blockchains have been a thing. So I envision a world where everybody has their rollups, but nobody knows that they're on a rollup or anything else. That's kind of the vision.
My
like
last
sweat.
question for you. Yeah. My last question about Near for you. We've been picking your brain about the things we think are interesting at Near. And I'm curious, as like the guy who's making things happen at Near, that's your job, is to make things actually happen. What are you personally like just most excited about that Near is building?
Yeah, I think like the AI, because I just worked on it, like that was my main motivation over the last 3 months.
Your baby.
Yeah, that's been like kind of with a lot of our team, like amazing engineering team and marketing team and so on. But what I'm excited about mainly is, I think going into that vision that Cesar mentioned is like going into that sort of world where you don't really care about a blockchain. You just go in there, you do whatever you want to do. You don't really care where these things are. You don't have to bridge somewhere from one point to another. You don't have to wait for that bridge to happen and then get scared for like 10 minutes that, oh, did it actually work for me, or did it actually fall back? Like,
those are the worst 10 minutes of my life.
Like, yeah, do I have my funds? Like, if somebody stole my key, do I really have my funds? Like, can I use something else? Like a recovery that I use with my email, like those things that make stuff way easier for everyone. Because if you ask your significant other or anybody else to kind of use these things, it's just kind of be like, this is scary. Like it's still not improved since I came to the space. So that's what we're excited about. And that's kind of the vision, like making everything way easier for everyone.
Which I freaking love.
One of the things that you guys did off right, and I think this deserves major kudos, because I know ETH you can pay in order to get that, but you guys have my wallet address for Near is papabigmac.near, and that's just straight off the gate. I didn't have to pay anyone to reserve that for me. And so when people say like, hey, can I send you something to your wallet? I can just send them that, papabigmac.near. I don't need to send them 0x 75 million trillion XYZ, anything like that. So I think that's something small, but it's huge.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, which I love. I mean, I've been saying for a long time, anyone that has been listening throughout this bear market, that I just desperately want to see people stop fighting over like my blockchain is 0.5% faster and just make it usable, like practically usable so that we can do more than theorize. And I think that's exactly what you guys are striving to do. And that's fantastic. I had one closing question. I don't know if anyone else did, but I have one closing question. It's not even necessarily about Near, but it's about you. Building in the space, about you navigating, about you watching things, someone who lives in crypto full time. Who should, or is there someone out there or a project or a protocol or a blockchain that you personally really admire that you think deserves attention, that people should be paying attention to?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, recently I've been loving a lot of the Solana products, like being honest. The UI, UX of using Jupiter or any of them are great. Just like having going back to that, like waiting like 5 minutes to kind of, did it swap actually, or did it not work? So I've been seeing that Jupiter doing that really well.
Shout out to Jupiter. We just talked about them this morning before we were on with you.
It was great. I mean, like, I think it's a great experience that everybody can like think about. In the Near ecosystem, I think like Cosmos is something I'm excited about as well. Just to give that sort of Brave browser-like experience to somebody in Vietnam doing whatever they're doing, and then earning tokens to kind of spend that. Because I mean, I grew up in Turkey, which is I've seen inflation being a problem, and like those things are very, very huge, and obviously USDC. But that's
solving real world problems, applying crypto to people who need it more than just us having fun with it. I dig that. Awesome. Thank you, Altan. It has been a pleasure to pick your brain. I'm really excited to drop this episode. Really excited for people to get more exposure to Near. Amazing. Thank you. Appreciate it.